On the line with us, our buddy Michelangelo Signorile, the journalist, commentator, host of the Michelangelo Signorile Show, right here on Sirius XM Progress Channel 127, right after my program, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. You can read his work at the Signorile Report on Substack, signorile.substack.com, and his website, msignorile. Michelangelo, welcome back to the program. I'm always.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I'm always reluctant to go into this. Is this guy gay? Because of the implicit. There's something wrong with that, to it, and so I was very reluctant to pursue the topic of your newsletter yesterday. I subscribed to your newsletter, the Signorile Report. I think it's marvelous, and I encourage everybody who's listening to me to sign up. It's free, and it's just brilliant. But you were raising this question, and it's a question that, in fact, let me back up just a little bit and just tell a quick story, if I may. Back, 6-8 years ago, I had a guest on my program who was, his name was Paul. I'm forgetting his last name. Paul Cameron, I think his name was. He was.
Oh yeah.
You know who he is.
Right-wing extremist.
Yeah, and rather elderly. He's in his 70s. And he was on, and he brought his wife to the studio. And he started going, every time I would ask him a question about anything, he would start going into these long descriptions of anal sex. And finally, I just stopped him and I said, I don't understand, Paul, why you're so fascinated by or obsessed with anal sex. I don't think about this all day long. I don't think about men having sex with men all day long. I don't know why you do. Is it possible that you're gay and you're denying it? And there was this long pause.
Wow.
And finally he said, I don't think so. And which I thought was shockingly honest. And, we had then a conversation after that. And I never heard from him again. To the best of my knowledge, I never saw him again in the media. I don't even know if he's still out there, preaching his stuff. But whenever anybody is like super hyper focused on their homophobia, I have to ask, what's going on with this person?
Yeah.
So apropos of that, please tell us your story that you shared in your newsletter yesterday.
Well, it's about the new House Speaker, Mike Johnson, and his Christian nationalist agenda, which is incredibly obsessive when it comes to the issue of homosexuality. I mean, much of his work before he was in Congress, when he was in the legislature in Louisiana, but also before that, he worked for this group, the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is now the Alliance Defense Fund. They're bringing all of the anti-LGBTQ cases up to the Supreme Court. He was focused so obsessively on the issue of homosexuality. And to the point you were making, we've seen many people who have been obsessed with this issue, whether they're politicians or preachers, and then it turns out they're gay, right? If they've come out in scandals that have come out, and there's even been some studies on this. People who are that obsessed. And what struck me about him in particular, because we've seen a lot of reports about what he's done in his background, was a report that CNN had published yesterday on their website, Andrew Kaczynski, who's one of their great researchers there, about how Mike Johnson had been very involved as in his role with the ADF, the Alliance Defense Fund, with the group Exodus International, which is this notorious so-called ex-gay group. They engage in, what they called conversion therapy, which is harmful and bogus and now banned in 26 states and Washington, D.C., 100 municipalities. Exodus International shut down in 2013 because they were getting lawsuits, but also they have one big problem. They apologize for the dangerous cure therapy they put forth, but they have one big problem. All of these so-called ex-gay groups, they keep losing their leaders over and over again because their leaders are purportedly ex-gay, but they come to realize that there's no such thing, and they come out as gay.
Right.
And then they become advocates against this therapy, and they talk about how psychologically harmful it was. So everybody who's been involved in a leadership role in this whole so-called ex-gay movement, I mean, many of them, I should say, come out later. So it fascinated me that he was so involved, and he was very involved with Exodus, where he would actually make videos for them. Now, they had videos that they made at the time of so-called former lesbians, former homosexuals, whatever they wanted to call them. But it was interesting that he even made a video saying, you don't have to choose this lifestyle. And that word, for me, always, makes me raise a question.
Yeah.
If people
Sounds like he's
believe
talking to himself.
homosexuality is a choice, then yeah, they made a choice of some kind, because most people would not say that their sexual orientation was a choice that they made. But if you believe it's a choice, then you're either bisexual or you're gay and suppressing something, because why would somebody choose to do something that goes against their religious beliefs, that will get them discriminated against? I mean, nobody would choose that. So it rang a bell with me, and he even used that term. And now in 2023, he's used it in the past. When he was on Sean Hannity the other night, he said he was trying to, soften his image. And he said something like, I love everyone, including anybody, no matter their lifestyle choice. Right. So that just raised bells for me. And that's when I wrote that piece on Substack. Did he make a choice? And why is he so obsessed with this?
Right. So here's a guy whose wife didn't come to D.C. for his swearing in. He weirdly said she's been on her knees for the last week and is exhausted. On her knees in prayer, although the double entendre was not lost, I think, on the D.C. press corps. Right. And who had a relationship with a young black man who is just 5 years younger than him, I believe, 2 years before he got married, and then later claimed that they had adopted this kid, but then now he says, no, we didn't adopt him, we just kind of, I mean, it's just like there's these weird kind of flags. Are you suggesting that he's struggling with his own homosexuality?
Well, it raises all kinds of issues and questions about why he's so focused on this. Why did he commit so much of his energy and his life to this idea that people could change? And, a lot of people, when they do that, when they are focused on that, they're really trying to convince themselves that they're not gay, right? When they can focus on how you can change, you don't have to do this, right? You can, and they become evangelists for it. It's really about, trying to tell themselves something. So yes, it raises for me that issue and makes us wonder about his past. And I hope that journalists look into it, because he's now Speaker of the House. He hasn't been vetted as a member of Congress, and he has an enormous amount of power.
Yeah. It's I mean, I can tell you just in my own personal experience, I was probably 7, 8 years old when I first started noticing that girls were different and interesting. And, I have gay friends who have told me that, it was probably around that age when they noticed that people of
Me too, but it was about boys.
Exactly. And so you would think that anybody outside of the occasional bisexual, and those are very few and far between, by the way, true bisexuals, that outside of that anybody would know that you don't make a choice to be gay or to be straight or whatever you want to, or trans or anything else. That this is the way we're born. This is wired into us.
Right.
And
well, and
go ahead.
If you even listen to some of these people who've promoted these so-called ex-gay therapies, and even some religious faiths have them as well. The Catholic Church has one. They all basically still say they're not really converting people, that they're just helping people to manage urges that they have, right? So they admit it.
Right, or disassociate themselves from a lifestyle, in quotes. I mean, some of this language is just so offensive to me. So, does this make a difference? I mean, outside of Mike Johnson struggling with his own demons, causing him to take policy positions that are destructive, particularly to gender minorities, But does this really does this matter to us?
Well, look, I couldn't care less what anybody does with their life, and
In their
certainly
bedroom, yeah.
what he's doing with regard to even if he doesn't want to act on his sexual orientation, that's his choice to do whatever he wants. Again, using his word, but when he's actively then working against people to try to pass laws, and the impetus for that is a self-hatred or a hostility at something inside of himself, right? And that he's passing laws to try to allow for discrimination. He in Louisiana introduced a bill that would have allowed for discrimination against gay and lesbian couples when he was in the legislature. He just introduced a bill last year in Congress. He was the sponsor of it. It was a federal "Don't Say Gay" bill, like what Ron DeSantis did in Florida, which would harm students who are LGBTQ, parents as well, teachers, because they wouldn't be able to even, let anybody know anything about their lives. Students with two dads couldn't say they had two dads. I mean, that's how these laws work. And the federal one wanted to defund any schools that allowed for any discussion of those issues. So to me, that's where it becomes very relevant what he's doing and why it needs to be looked into.
Yeah, shades of Larry Craig. I mean,
Exactly.
at some point, this, when you live a lie, it pops out. It breaks through, or often. I shouldn't make that as an absolute assertion, but it just seems like Mike. It just seems like a tragedy to me.